I'm here today with Steven Klein, a product specialist with Zon Dental. But more than that, Steven Klein is, in our industry, one of the OGs when it comes to porcelain and zirconia. Steven, everyone loves an origin story. Give us a little bit of an update or a look back on how you stumbled into porcelain, zirconia, and the lab industry.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I really kind of cut my teeth, so to speak, in the porcelain world with Bob Miller back in the day when it was Darby Dental Lab Supply, and that, of course, was then ultimately sold to Zon Dental. And I worked in that field with Zon Dental for about 6 years, where really the focus was the Nortaki porcelains and Penchon porcelains, and really moving that whole product line forward in the industry. And then ultimately was tapped by Carrare Nortaki to come on board and become a representative for them here in the US. And then, of course, that was very focused on porcelain, as well as when they launched their aesthetic katana zirconia. That became part of my tool bag of talking about and working with that particular product.
Noritake Katana, great porcelain, super aesthetic zirconia when it came to market, and of course, still today. Fast forward, what I'd say 15 years or
Yeah,
so.
it's been about 13 years. Yes, that's
Okay.
right. About
So
12 to 13 years ago is when they launched the Katana. And I worked with the Karari Noritake team for those 12, 13 years to bring us up to current date. Came back to the family at Zon and really enjoying, reconnecting with all of the people that I have known for a very long time. And of course, a lot of new faces as well. So it's exciting times for me.
zirconia has changed, right? The market has changed. Every company out there has a zirconia, and we are in a little bit of an interesting time, I think, when sometimes zirconia is good enough. Is it worth the premium? There are price competitive options out there, and ultimately, dental laboratories. I haven't seen the latest numbers from the NADL or LMT, but I'd say most labs are milling today in house. What do you think is so important when it comes to choosing a zirconia or picking the option that's right for every different business? Right, this industry is so unique that one lab's business model and preference is not going to be the same as the next lab's. When it comes to adopting a zirconia or picking one of the many options on the market, to you, somebody who's been around porcelain and zirconia uh, from the start almost, why does it matter, and what should a lab be thinking about?
Yeah, Andrew, that's a lot to unpack there, but I'll do my best here. There, zirconia really became an aesthetic solution about 13 years ago. And I say aesthetic a little bit in quotes on that because it was pretty white. There was a lot of opacity to the material. It was mostly white. You were required to stain it in the green state, meaning pre-sintering, to get the aesthetics that you really were looking for. There weren't a lot of choices back then, and so to say that it's come a long way is really maybe an understatement, because honestly, now you have very little labor that is required to get the good aesthetic looks out of the material. You have multi-layered materials where the chroma is built into the zirconia, making it look very natural tooth-like right from the start. And the latest trend, of course, is adding layered translucency to the material. So the technician, laboratory owner technician, really does not have to dedicate a lot of work and labor to get acceptable and beyond acceptable results, meaning they are very aesthetic now, right out of the sintering oven, maybe a little touch up, maybe some stain and glaze, but a lot of the materials are now capable of just being hand polished or even machine polished, whatever the case may be, how big the laboratory is. They find a solution for their needs. So those particular traits are exactly what any technician or laboratory owner should be looking for. Is we want a material that is going to be highly aesthetic right out of the mill. We want to get it into the sintering oven without doing a lot of labor work to it, and we want predictable results. And of course, that translucency equation is really important as well. If it's going to look natural, it must have that translucent factor to it as well.
So there are just so many zirconias on the market. You open up any of the industry leading publications, and everyone has a zirconia. In your experience and in your opinion, when you have companies that are using either Toso powders or manufacturing their final discs out of production centers, maybe in Germany or in Europe, how is that quality different than maybe some of the others that are not?
Well, I think the biggest equation to that is being time tested. You want to pick a company like Dental Direkt that's been around for a very long time, and they were one of the industry leaders, right at the forefront of the aesthetic materials. So they have a track record. You have strength that's built into it. Anybody can talk numbers, but the real proof is in longevity in the mouth. And I think that's an important factor when choosing a zirconia is how long have they been in the industry, and do we have either clinical results or just long term use in the patient's mouth. And Dental Direct definitely checks those boxes.
And you mentioned Dental Direct, and of course, we sell and distribute that today. So many options, right? Dental Direct has a variety of products. They have a variety of zirconia lines within their zirconia portfolio. Steven Klein opens up a lab tomorrow. You talk about workflow, you talk about aesthetics. Why would a lab gravitate towards one versus another? In your experience, is it the multi translucency? Is it the multi strength? Is it all of those things combined? Can you walk me through the mind of Steven Klein, potential lab owner and
Sure.
operator?
Sure. And I think we know the laboratory operating budgets are getting tighter every year. I mean, it's a fact of the matter. And so one of the key choices in selecting a zirconia would be how many of the indicated cases will this do, and take their QYHL material, for instance. That one is a multi-layered, multi-translucent material. It can pretty much cover every indication, including all on X type full arch cases down to single veneers. So it's aesthetic, it has the translucency. And translucency and strength go hand in hand. You trade one for the other, so that is the nature of zirconia. But that particular product, for instance, covers all of those particular traits that we're looking for. And I think that would be, if I were opening the lab tomorrow, I'd say this is one of my choices because I don't have to inventory a lot of materials now to solve particular instances. This one material will do it all.
So you walk into a lab and you're going through zirconia options now. What is the number one or some of the top, I don't want to call them issues, but top steps to successfully kind of prepare for a production shift, right? We know it's not overnight. What's the devil in the details, as they might say?
I believe that really that preparation prior to trying one of the new zirconias is critical. You have one opportunity to make a good impression, and so I think it's important to do the homework up front. Make sure that the oven is actually programmed correctly. It is surprising how many times that it's not when I go into a laboratory and they assure me, oh yes, absolutely, we have this programmed and ready, and the program is slightly off. And so like baking a cake, if you don't follow the instructions, you're not going to have good results. Same is true with zirconia. So the other step that I really recommend any laboratory to do is use some sort of temperature verification rings in the oven. Make sure that what you see on the readout on the front of the oven is actually what's happening inside the oven. That is really important because as these materials become more technical, meaning the higher translucency levels and layered translucent and chroma, these things create a narrower window of having really good results. So it's important to test that oven, make sure that the readout is on the outside of the oven is actually what's happening inside, and then make sure that it's programmed correctly. I don't think there's a lot of milling strategies that are going to change when you're working already with a multi-layered zirconia. There's only small changes between that, so it's not as critical as making sure that the sintering is done properly, and then they can expect very good results.
So new zirconia or a switch from one brand to another is sintering furnace is paramount. Number one, whether it can get to those temperatures. Of course, I'm not a technician, but I know it's got to get up to a certain temperature and then eventually come down. Is that the missing piece when it comes to trying a different zirconia and ensuring success?
Yes, it is. I would say that would be primary, is to make sure that that oven is doing its job correctly and that it was programmed correctly for that specific zirconia. Because as we know, there are so many out there. I think there's a tendency to think that all zirconia is the same, and it's not. You have to use the recipe for that particular zirconia. In other words, if it needs a certain high temperature and it needs to be held at a particular length of time for at that high temperature, then it's important. It's really quite critical to the success of that zirconia to follow those instructions.
and and that sounds pretty straightforward, right? For the most part, use a calibration ring, ensure that it gets there. We're not
It is.
saying
It
that
is
a
pretty straightforward. Yeah.
yeah,
The key thing is, we all get busy in our day to day. So it's tough to skip over some of those extra steps and say, well, it should be fine. I'm using zirconia already. I can fire it at this program and we'll take a look at what it looks like. But that's really not doing yourself a service, and it's certainly doing a disservice to the material, because you may have a material in your hands that can really outperform and outshine whatever you're currently using. But if you don't give it that extra attention to follow the instructions, then expectations are going to be wildly hit or miss. That it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they in fact invest in a new furnace. A lot of times that's a choke point in the laboratory anyway for getting all the production done in a timely and shall we say, less stressful manner. Having that additional sintering furnace, if one happens to go down, is not the worst thing in the world. But for the most part, the material will use any furnace they currently have, as long as it's fairly recently purchased. Some of these newer materials have higher temperatures, and not all of the older ovens are capable of hitting the higher temperatures. And by that, I mean in that range of 1500 plus, 1530. Some of those are temperatures that are needed, but some of the older ovens just aren't capable of reaching.
like everything else, right? If you're going to renovate a house, you're not going to cut corners. If you're making an investment in one room, maybe you're not ready to do it all, but in the grand scheme of things, you're probably going to do the kitchen together, right? So if you're going to replace a refrigerator, maybe you replace the freezer too. So the furnace, of course, is important.
Yeah, that's right. It really is. And let's look at what has happened in the business model of dental laboratories in the US in the last, 5 to 6 years. Zirconia was kind of I'm also offering that, a number of years ago. And now it is the forefront. It's the majority of the work that these laboratories are doing. So it's what's keeping the lights on and keeping them in business. It's the material that all the doctors have tended to gravitate towards. Speed and ease of processing it is really nice. And so the laboratories, as long as they have the right tools to do the job, they're in the ball game.
Yeah, to end this, one of the best things about being with Zon Dental is that we have all of those tools. We have the zirconia, we have the sintering furnaces, we have the milling machines. We really are the total distribution when it comes to giving the dental labs what they want and what they need to provide the clinician and or the practice with a highly aesthetic result. I'm sure there are some out there that aren't milling zirconia today. I think they're probably few and far between. Whatever the case is, what would you say to that laboratory that's yet to make the investment into offering a zirconia restoration?
I do believe it is really important that that partnership with a company like Zon Dental is critical, because the support, the team that is behind that sale is extensive. It is really deep and it is really knowledgeable. That was a very big part of why I wanted to work with Zon again. Is the depth of service and support that they provide the customer is incomparable. There is no one else that is operating at the laboratory level that can provide that kind of service. It's really important with these new technical materials to have that support, that someone has your back. And if there's something that you're seeing that you don't like, you didn't expect it, maybe there's an issue with the oven, or maybe there's an issue with the materials, whatever that might be, there is a team member within Zon that can help solve that and service that particular issue.
And you are one of those technical experts, right? At the end of the
Sure, of
day,
course.
a
Yeah.
lab or a customer that's interested in making a switch or making the investment, you are available. You are one of the gurus in the industry and in the market, and we're excited that customers and prospects can really reach out and talk to you and figure out why implement one of our zirconias into their lab and really use you as a trusted resource. So we appreciate having you on the team and know that any laboratory that reaches out, you would be more than happy to talk to.
Absolutely. That is so true.